Look at your jacket right now. Maybe it's down-filled, maybe it's waterproof. You put it on without thinking, but 25,000 years ago, every single piece of clothing your ancestors wore had to be made by hand, from scratch, from an animal they killed themselves. And if they got it wrong, even slightly, they were dead before morning. So how did they figure it out? And why is the answer more sophisticated than anything you'd expect? Let's start with what cold actually does to a human body. At minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit, exposed skin begins to die in under 10 minutes. Your body starts shutting down blood flow to your hands and feet to protect your core. Your fingers stop working. Then your judgment goes. Then you stop feeling cold at all. That last part is when you die. A modern person dropped into an ice age winter without preparation wouldn't survive one night. The cold during that period wasn't winter in Canada cold. It was the kind of cold that makes Canada look tropical. Now here's what most people get completely wrong about ancient humans. They imagine them as lucky survivors, stumbling through blizzards, eating whatever they could find. But archaeology tells a completely different story. These people were engineers. Here's something that will permanently change how you think about your ancestors. We have this image of early humans as barely surviving, desperate, one bad winter away from disappearing completely. But 50,000 years ago, humans were already living above the Arctic Circle, in Siberia, in conditions so extreme that even today, very few people choose to live there, not because they were forced to, because they chose to follow the animals. And they didn't just survive there. They thrived. They had children. They built communities. They made art. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens because of knowledge. Deep, sophisticated, hard-won knowledge about how the natural world works. Let me give you one example that changes everything. Researchers studying ancient campsites found something unexpected in the soil. Traces of specific plants. Plants that don't grow anywhere near those sites today. These plants had one thing in common. They were all natural antiseptics, natural painkillers, natural fever reducers. These people weren't just surviving the cold. They had a working knowledge of pharmacology. They knew which plants healed wounds, which plants reduced fever, which plants were poisonous, and which ones weren't. That knowledge didn't come from one person figuring it out. It came from thousands of years of careful observation, passed down from generation to generation, refined and expanded with every passing century. And here's the thing that gets me every time I think about it. All of that knowledge, every plant, every technique, every solution they discovered, lived entirely inside human memory. There was no way to write it down, no way to store it anywhere except in the minds of the people who carried it, which means that when a person died, knowledge died with them, unless they had passed it on. So they did. Every single day, teaching children, sharing discoveries, keeping the knowledge alive the only way they could, by talking. That's what those early communities actually were. Not just groups of people trying to stay warm, living libraries, walking repositories of everything humanity had learned about how to stay alive on a brutal planet. And they were remarkably good at it. Let's start with clothing, because this is where it gets genuinely impressive. Researchers found needles at sites in Siberia dating back 50,000 years. Not pointed sticks. Actual needles with eyes, made from bone thin enough to thread sinew through. Think about what that means. These people weren't just wrapping themselves in hides. They were sewing, constructing fitted garments with multiple layers, each layer chosen for a specific reason. The innermost layer, soft fur facing the skin, trapping warm air in thousands of tiny pockets. The same principle as thermal underwear today. The middle layer, thicker hide providing insulation. The same principle as a fleece jacket today. The outer layer, tough, water-resistant skin, treated with animal fat to repel moisture. The same principle as a Gore-Tex shell today. 3 layers, 3 functions, figured out independently. 25,000 years before any of those products existed. But clothing alone wasn't enough. They needed shelter. And here's where archaeology completely shocked the scientists who found it. In Ukraine, at a site called Mezherish, researchers discovered the remains of houses, not caves, not windbreaks, actual engineered structures built entirely from the bones of woolly mammoths. Picture this: mammoth skulls, each one weighing over 200 pounds, used as foundation stones, curved tusks arranged into dome-shaped arches, hundreds of smaller bones filling the gaps, the whole thing covered in stitched mammoth hide. Inside, a central fire pit with smaller fires around the edges to create warm zones for different activities. Sleeping areas, food preparation areas, tool-making areas. It wasn't a pile of bones to hide behind. It was a designed living space with heating zones built by people who planned weeks ahead because construction started in late summer before winter made outdoor work impossible. Now here's the part that stops modern engineers cold. Experimental reconstructions of these mammoth bone houses have been tested in extreme conditions. The results were almost unbelievable. A properly built mammoth bone house, using only fire, no modern insulation, could maintain interior temperatures 40 to 50 degrees warmer than the outside air. Modern Arctic emergency shelters with industrial insulation often don't perform better. StoneAge builders matched the thermal performance of 21st century engineering, using bones and stone tools. But none of this worked without solving one more problem: fuel. On the treeless Ice Age steppe, there was almost no wood. So what did they burn? Mammoth dung. Dried, prepared, and managed like a resource. And bone, but not just thrown on the fire. Chemical analysis of ancient hearths shows the bone was processed first to maximize burn efficiency and heat output. They weren't burning whatever they could find. They were managing fuel the way a modern engineer manages energy output. Here's what I want you to think about. These people had no books, no teachers, no accumulated written knowledge to draw from. Everything they knew about layering materials, about thermal dynamics, about fuel efficiency, about construction, they figured out through observation, experimentation, and passing knowledge down through generations. The knowledge in those mammoth bone houses took thousands of years to develop. It was refined over hundreds of generations, and it worked so well that military Arctic survival programs today teach techniques derived directly from it. At the end of the Ice Age, as temperatures rose and forests spread, all of that knowledge became unnecessary. It wasn't lost in a disaster, it just stopped being needed. And then we forgot it. And then we spent 100 years rediscovering it with modern science. And what we found was that our ancestors had already solved it perfectly, with nothing but time, necessity, and a refusal to give up. The jacket you put on without thinking this morning, it works on exactly the same principles your ancestors figured out 25,000 years ago. You didn't invent staying warm, you inherited it. Subscribe. Next week, we're going even further back, to the moment when humans first discovered fire, and what it actually changed about who we are.